of 4 private astronauts on a mission to orbit Earth from pole to pole. Out of the 4 crew members, Rabe Voch became the first German to fly to space. During their mission, she and her fellow crew members will take part in 22 research experiments, largely centered on how spaceflight and microgravity affect the human body. Now, this is SpaceX's 6th private astronaut flight and expands its dominance in global human spaceflight arena. So Germany has just sent its first women astronaut into the space. She and 3 other astronauts are on a SpaceX rocket for a 4-day mission. Here with more details is DW correspondent Emily Leshner joining us from Berlin. Good evening, Emily. Tell us about the flight. Who's on board?
Yes, there are 4 people on board this flight, one of whom, as you mentioned, is making history as the first German woman in space. Her name is Rabe Voch. She is a 29-year-old from Berlin. She studied electrical engineering, and she's taking on the role of scientific specialist on this flight. Along with her is a Norwegian filmmaker, as well as an Australian polar explorer and guide. And then the Chinese-born billionaire who is funding the entire trip, his name is Chun Wang. He actually met Voch during an expedition training and asked if she would be interested in coming on board this mission, provided that he fully fund the trip. She agreed, and here we are today.
And what is their mission exactly? What are they hoping to learn from this flight, Emily?
Well, this mission is making another historical first. For the first time in space travel history, the rocket will orbit the Earth from one pole to the other. This orbit path is generally avoided because it requires more energy and there is some radiation risk for longer flights. That's why this one is a short 4-day trip. But this pole-to-pole mission is a research mission, and there's also a nod to this research in its name. It's called the Fram 2, and it's named after the first Fram, which was a 19th century Norwegian polar research vessel. And the crew is planning on conducting more than 20 scientific studies. They'll take the first X-ray in space, for example. They'll also be cultivating mushrooms in very low gravity environments. And then when the crew comes back to Earth, they'll attempt to do some basic tasks without the typical medical assistance that follows, just to see how their bodies were faring in space.
Sounds very interesting, but at the same time, it seems that these days we are hearing more and more of astronauts going to space in private rockets. Are the days of government-funded space travel over, and are we really shifting to a time when space travel is driven by private companies and investors, Emily?
Yeah, that's a very smart observation. There has been a shift since the 2010s away from government-funded space travel by the ESA or NASA, for example, towards travel that's funded by the private sector and investors. As you mentioned, this flight is being operated by SpaceX. That's Elon Musk's company. Just last year alone, SpaceX launched more than 100 rockets. And Musk is just one of a number of billionaires who have set their sights on space travel. There have been benefits to this move towards privately funded space travel in terms of driving up investment, reducing launch costs, which are very high, and generating excitement over the...
This is the aircraft carrier shelter you seized, previously owned by a small faction of about 800 people.
Now it's entirely yours. Although
there are a lot more flights taking place, there's a lot more space debris, and NASA does believe that the uptick in travel can help erode the Earth's ozone layer. But here in Germany, it's very exciting news to send the first German astronaut into space.
Indeed it is. Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us and bringing us the latest development on this update. Now, U.S. President